So now that Jujutsu Kaisen is over, I want to talk about all of Yuji's abilities and techniques, and I want to start with his domain expansion because, it's like the most exciting, and then after that I'll go into the rest of his abilities and how it all works and how it plays into the domain expansion. So we finally see Yuji's domain expansion for the first time in his final round against Sukuna, and when he activates it, it seemingly becomes a facsimile of his hometown Sendai. There's no real greater reasoning to this other than Yuji just feeling comfortable here, and I guess he found it as a great intermediary, as a way to talk Sukuna into essentially surrendering without Yuji being forced to kill him, which, doesn't wind up working out. But we've seen before that domain expansions can become like other real life locations. Like for example, when Dagon activated his domain expansion, it became like a beach. But unlike Dagon's domain, there doesn't really seem to be any environmental factors within it that aid Yuji in the domain's lethality. His domain also has this odd effect where it can change the appearance of his opponent as well. Like Sukuna is depicted the way that he is when he possessed Yuji, but in reality he actually appears as his, four-armed Hionara cell. And he actually reverts back to his true form when he activates the Hollow Wicker Basket, which protects him from sure hits of the domain, but I guess it also dispels whatever appearance-altering ability it has as well. So that, along with the appearance of Sendai, I guess is just more of a backdrop. But it could also play into giving him his quote-unquote power. Because before Yuji activates his domain expansion against Sukuna, he remembers what Gojo had told him in the beginning of the series when they both were inside of Jogo's domain. He says, "You'll expend a lot of cursed energy to form a domain expansion, but it comes with perks, like the environmental factors that boost your level 1. Think about it like a buff in a video game." So yeah, this facsimile of Sendai is boosting Yuji's power. Now, as for what it does, it's kind of just like a vehicle to deliver Yuji's soul boundary dismantle. We're going to talk about how Yuji developed his own dismantle from Sukuna's curse technique Shrine later on, but Yuji's unique ability to be able to target the boundary between Sukuna and Megumi's souls has been Yuji's main weapon in his final battle against Sukuna to defeat him and save Megumi at the same time. But with Sukuna being so agile and overpowered, it's not easy for Yuji to land. So that's why he decides to use the domain expansion against Sukuna, since the applied sure hit to his domain is the soul boundary dismantle. And Sukuna is able to avoid it for a little bit using his Hollow Wicker Basket, but once Nobara wakes up from her coma and hits Sukuna's finger with a resonance, it's enough for Sukuna to release his grip, deactivating the Hollow Wicker Basket and finally getting hit by the sure hit dismantle. Now, surprisingly, that's not enough to defeat Sukuna. The fight continues for a little bit after this, where Yuji ultimately winds up fully defeating him with one last black flash, but it is still inside of the domain, so he is getting quote-unquote buffed here regardless. But yeah, that's Yuji's domain expansion. Very bread and butter, not very flashy, but it gets the job done. But before we get into the rest of Yuji's ability, I actually have something really exciting to share with all of the Jujutsu Kaisen community, because while the manga is ending, that doesn't mean that like Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole is over, especially because Jujutsu Kaisen Phantom Parade is now open for pre-registration. I've been hearing about this game for a while now, so I'm pretty excited to finally play it, and I'm sure you are too. Also, it's actually the first officially licensed Jujutsu Kaisen mobile game. It has all the iconic characters with all of their awesome curse techniques and abilities, and the game perfectly recreates the original story. Like, for example, you could play as Yuji and hit the Black Flash, or play as Megumi and utilize his 10 Shadow summons. I mean, I personally want to use Nobara for her resonance technique. It's overall probably the most deadly ability. Also, they have team events where you can invite your friends to form your own Phantom Parade team, and the more friends you invite, the more rewards you'll receive. Just send your invitation code, and when they register, you can win up to an additional 1,100 cubes. So guys, like I said before, pre-registration is now open, and you can pre-register through the App Store, the Google Play Store, or the official game website, and I'll have all the links in my description. Guys, this is a must play for all Jujutsu Kaisen fans, with tons of pre-registration rewards just waiting to be unlocked. So don't miss out, sign up now. Thanks, guys. But now let's get into Yuji's curse technique. Did it come from within himself? Kind of, but not really. Gojo was right about that. He couldn't just develop something that you need to be born with, but let's take a look at how Yuji was able to get a curse technique so that he wouldn't immediately be swatted by Sukuna in their fight. We all know about what Todo taught him and the stuff that happened during that traumatic Shibuya arc. But what's new is the steps Yuji had to take in case the big guns didn't take down Sukuna as planned. I'm sure he never expected to have to take over for both Gojo and Kashimo, though. Either way, having Choso around means thanks to his other siblings, he can inherit their innate curse technique. But before we touch on that, we should start from one of the biggest surprises our young MC added to his list of skills. Arguably the most useful, Yuji's learned the basics of reverse curse technique. This means that he can heal himself when his crazy endurance and strength can't quite cut it against Sukuna's abilities. At its core, it means taking cursed energy and switching it to positive to reverse the effects of whatever's been done to his body, since curse energy is inherently negative. What makes it more challenging to master is how it stems from the mind and not the body/gut like with cursed energy. Also, it requires the user to multiply negative energy with itself to create that positive. It can also heal a burnt-out curse technique or even the soul if the person is proficient enough. And because rebuilding living flesh and blood requires cursed energy, only someone with a big enough storage of it would succeed. For curses, it works a little differently and can be easier for them if they're special grade level. From what we've seen, the shortest path to acquiring it involved body swapping with Yuta, who's a genius in his own right. But having an expert healer like Shoko around certainly didn't hurt. You know, just to iron out any wrinkles and the understanding of how it works. All Yuji has is a month, more or less, to get these necessary techniques down, so of course there's specifics he has to learn as he goes. And that's why, in the middle of battle, there's still some things he struggles to do. Thankfully, when he's pushed himself too far, he's able to fine-tune his reverse curse technique with Choso's help. Think of it like this. The same way that breathing techniques in Demon Slayer can help a fighter to slow blood loss or poison, Choso teaches Yuji to focus on his immediate injury so that he can send all the positive cursed energy there to repair it and replenish his lost blood. That way, Yuji can recover enough of his hit points, or health bar, to continue the Royal Rumble against Sukuna. Considering that Yuji picked up much faster on how to use and control reverse curse technique initially, it's kind of a surprise that his big brother is the one to catch him on the battlefield. Maybe it comes down to who has the most fight experience or years of honing their skills while in storage, like Choso was. But when we take into consideration that Yuji believes Sukuna is the reason for his quick learning curve, it makes more sense, because according to him, it has everything to do with Sukuna using reverse curse technique while in control of Yuji's body in difficult battles. And it's true that, especially at the detention center, Yuji's body would have been in really bad shape if Sukuna hadn't stepped in to heal it against the finger bearer. But he also inadvertently helped Yuji in Shibuya after the many injuries he got against Choso. He was on the verge of death after all. But there is something related to healing that Yuji got all on his own. Sukuna believes that Yuji's unshakable ideals match his own, which makes him more frustrating as an opponent, but also difficult to break mentally, no matter what happens to him or those he cares about. Is this a result of Mahito, or from being around someone as reliable as Choso for the past few months? In any case, Yuji won't let go of his goal until he's done, and he can only die after completing it. But at the same time, it's kind of related to reverse curse technique because it allows him to keep fighting past what would normally be possible. So in a sense, they go hand in hand. After the loss of Choso and an empty battlefield, Yuji did look disheartened again, but nothing like after the double loss in Shibuya. And let's not forget that Todo returned to lift his spirit again. That way, Yuji can focus on his goal while leaving his grief for later. But let's get back to something that's specific to his close family, something that Sukuna doesn't have, and that's blood manipulation. Sure, it requires Yuji to consume his half-sibling so he can use it in the first place, but if it means getting the coveted technique, then it's more than worth it. And let's not forget, it's to use against the King of Curses, who has an ungodly amount of tricks and techniques at the ready. Oh, and by consuming his half-siblings, I'm referring to the Curse Womb Death paintings that Choso had recovered from the Star Corridor warehouse. But anyway, blood manipulation just means that the user can control their own blood. With the limited time that they have, Yuji can't use it as skillfully as Choso, who's had like 150 years to practice it. Like, how could he collect blood and reuse it to attack? But Yuji's able to at least apply piercing blood and convergence to a degree. Only after convergence, which is condensing blood to its upper limit with cursed energy, is done properly, can piercing blood be performed. It's because that concentrated, powerful orb is shot out at the speed of sound. If any part of the first step is botched, the attack loses power. In other words, both are crucial to manipulating his blood, and very strong if used at moments when his opponents aren't expecting it. Unfortunately, Choso's not a great teacher. Otherwise, Yuji may have been able to learn more imaginative skills from him, rather than relying on fellow student Kamo Noritoshi. That and the lack of practice time are the biggest setbacks. If he had more than just a few weeks, Yuji could have been using something more OP like Supernova, since Choso was giddy with the thought of teaching him that. The only difference is the amount of orbs created through convergence, and how they can move in multiple directions. So far, Yuji hasn't been able to use blood manipulation to turn the tides of the fight, but maybe in the upcoming chapters he might. I just hope it doesn't involve consuming some part of Choso's charred remains. In terms of innate gifts, Yuji has been created with a unique constitution and a soul to collect knowledge with. When I say knowledge, I don't mean something concrete like language or mathematical skills. It's way deeper than that, because his uncle Sukuna, with his slicing techniques and divine flame, ends up helping him to become his malleable vessel. Or maybe we should thank Kenjaku. As you might have guessed, because they shared a body, and because he's the product of Sukuna's brother's DNA, Yuji can connect to Sukuna in a way that another person can't. In fact, Yuji can unleash a slashing technique of his own called Shrine. But in his case, would it be considered benevolent? Even his hands change appearance when he unleashes it, gaining animal-like claws that he can use to slice through objects that he touches. In other words, Yuji can cut through thick, heavy objects and even bodies like Sukuna, but to a lesser degree. It seems more like cleave than dismantle, since Yuji has to touch the target and can't just throw a slice Sukuna's way. So it's missing a bit of effectiveness. This is made more evident by the visual design of it. Instead of clean, sudden slashes, Yuji's involves dotted lines and scissors. It's almost like a toddler learning to craft things in school and needing to follow a trail with shaky hands. This effect may be because it's a new technique for Yuji, so he's not confident in using it yet, or maybe because of his personality and wanting to avoid any casualties by being as careful as possible. Considering that, he saw the Shibuya massacre but couldn't stop it, it would make sense. But more than likely, it's just because Yuji doesn't have enough experience with it yet, and he can't use it to its full potential. More interesting, though, is that it was awakened because he landed a black flash cleanly on Sukuna during their fight. And it's as if, through his understanding of Jujutsu deepening again, as well as the target in question being a former body roommate, it allowed Shrine to activate, having met some crazy requirements. But of course, it's also due to how long Sukuna used his body as a vessel, and the engraving he left on his soul, despite already being in a new body. But what if this is just the beginning of Yuji following in Sukuna's steps? Now that he has the cutting, the healing, could he replicate a similar type of open domain? Or maybe the next unexpected skill will be fire related, seeing as he's used it both within Yuji's body and against him. Not to mention that Shrine is the basis for everything Sukuna can perform with his cursed energy. Speaking of which, maybe Yuji could eventually cut through space like Sukuna, even with his training scissors. With regards to that, Kusakabe thinks that Sukuna is the cause of Yuji being able to absorb information from another soul that is housed within him, not unlike how he created a lesser shrine. And it still functions after that other soul has left his body. Essentially, this means that he could train through sharing his body with Kusakabe, gaining all the experience and techniques that would have taken anyone else months or years to grasp. With Kusakabe, they have no blood connection, and their house swap is only possible because of Yui's technique. That way, it's almost like Yuji gains a tattoo on his soul to work with. And since there's no special experiment involved, he would just be receiving the information through repeated practice until it becomes automatic for him. But getting back to Yuji's little training montage, we find out that he's picked up some vital defense techniques from a certain unmotivated sorcerer. And it's the new shadow style, Simple Domain, to counter Sukuna's malevolent one. Basically, it allows the user to counter a domain's attack by neutralizing the barrier from it. It does this by creating its own, smaller domain around the person, protecting them from outside forces. It's like having a temporary shield, pretty much. But with only weeks to get the gist of it through a type of imprinting, Yuji's not that great at it. He manages to keep it active for 99 seconds before it starts breaking apart from slashes. But combined with reverse curse technique, it gets most of the job done in a pinch. Or it would if not for Sukuna's insane understanding of Jujutsu and his quick thinking in a battle. He had no idea that Yuji could use the new shadow style, and yet Sukuna prepared to execute 2 massive techniques in a row just in case anyone survived the first round. Now, normally simple domains only taught to certain people, but with time others were able to figure out how it worked and picked it up on their own. Binding vows can also be used to change aspects of it for the user and the opponent. For example, both Miwa and Kusakabe use it to attack others with their blades. It's likely that if Yuji could focus on one of the things that he was learning, spend weeks on that alone, and with that same person, he would be able to surpass everyone's expectations. But then again, if he did, then he'd be lacking in one area needed to fend off a powerhouse like Sukuna. Without the time with Yuta, he wouldn't be able to heal, and without Kusakabe, he couldn't defend himself. With the claws that Yuji grew from awakening his own shrine, maybe Yuji would be able to perform one of Kusakabe's deflection techniques without having a sword. Related, but also slightly adjacent to using Simple Domain, is how well Yuji can attack the barrier between Sukuna and Megumi's souls. Now, let me explain. Using the new shadow style is most often used to protect from the outside attacks when a sure hit domain is launched against someone. Similarly to Falling Blossom Emotion, which can only be used by the big clans. In contrast, if someone is using a barrier to defend their bodies from injury, Yuji can break through it, just from the experience that's been engraved in him. It's like how domains are more reinforced inside than the outside, because normally no one would want to get inside. And we all know that Yuji's not a regular guy though. The skill to aim for someone's internal barrier started to show itself little by little. Mahito was the first clear example we got, with how Yuji was the only one able to attack Mahito's constantly morphing soul. Nobara could too, but only through resonance. But now that Yuji's gained so much Jujutsu knowledge, he can pinpoint where he needs to strike Sukuna in order to weaken his hold on Megumi's soul until he's free. And we could see that it makes the King of Curses nervous to feel his vessel slipping away. With Yuji's ease at attacking souls directly, could the next step be for him to forcefully take in one that he's aiming for? I think you know what I'm getting at. Maybe Yuji could strike Sukuna enough times to free his soul, take it back into his body, and then let himself be executed as planned. That seems like something he'd do to save what's left of Megumi's body and soul. There's also the chance that Yuji shocks us all by using his skill to take down any defense Sukuna might have up inside another person's domain. With that said, the next new ability isn't really new, but it's certainly come a long way. We know Yuji has talent when it comes to Black Flash. It's not something that just anyone can perform, and it's based mostly on luck, whether it will trigger or not, since it requires impeccable timing. And in case you don't remember the details, it happens when a physical attack is imbued with cursed energy within 1/1,000,000th of a second between them. Yes, that's about 0.0001 seconds. and if the user manages that, their power leaps up exponentially. To the power of 2.5 to be exact, by that distortion in space. In his fight against Mahito, it raised Yuji's combat output to 120%, with the curse matching him. Even Gojo, who's practically blessed by the gods, and the mangaka himself, admitted that he couldn't use it whenever he wanted, especially since his curse techniques ended fights too quickly for him to even get there. And yet Yuji, a relative freshman in the Jujutsu world, has been able to almost conjure it up anytime he really needs it. More often than not, as soon as Yuji gets serious enough, Black Flash is not far behind. And you can bet that a battle with Sukuna calls for that talent. So it's no surprise that Yuji manages to land 1, 2, or even 3 of them. What's crazy is that he's spamming these Black Flashes on Sukuna like it's Street Fighter combos, breaking his body and soul equally the more he performs it. Obviously, this means Yuji's taken the title of most used in the world, right? Not that we ever doubted it. Against someone as fierce as Sukuna, Yuji does it an astonishing 7 times. Although it's not really clear if it's quite in a row since it's a pretty fast-paced battle. Also, there are allies jumping in and out of the fight, so it might interrupt the chain when that happens. Still, that feat makes Yuji surpass everyone for the most times performed total. And Yuji's bragging rights don't end there. He continues to use it with no one around to be astonished by the ease with which he does against a monster threat like Sukuna, except us, of course. But by no means is Sukuna at his best. He's been chiseled down bit by bit by all the strongest Jujutsu sorcerers ganging up on him. But still, for Yuji to strike him with another Black Flash and then pierce his chest to try and grab his heart is not something that we could have pictured him doing in the past. Is it payback for when Sukuna took out his and chucked it in the grass? Like I said before, Black Flash isn't new to us, but this is a novel way of using it, and with how often Yuji's concentration brings it out, we might as well consider him the master of it. Is it possible there's more that Yuji's still saving up for a dire moment against Sukuna? Well, it's about time he shows us why he's the main character. Because it's like, where is his series breaking upgrade? It might be time to see him use some flames, domain amplification, or maybe even more body transformations. So I don't think Gege mentioned that Yuji could reach Sukuna's potential for no reason. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Let me know what you think about Yuji's domain expansion and curse technique and other abilities in the comments. If you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.